Egypt and UAE presidents discuss regional security, the Gaza ceasefire, and stability across several nations. Israeli airstrikes on northern Gaza persist despite ceasefire, causing casualties and humanitarian concerns. And US President Biden announces details on the ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas.
I give you my word. I still believe it.
Hello there and good afternoon. It's 4 o'clock Cairo local time and you're watching Q News, and we begin today's bulletin with the Gaza ceasefire. Egypt's President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi has addressed regional security, supporting the Gaza ceasefire agreement and detainee swap with the UAE President Mohammed bin Zayed. That came as the UAE President welcomed President el-Sisi at Abu Dhabi International Airport. The two leaders discussed strengthening bilateral ties, particularly in economic, commercial and investment sectors. Addressing regional security and stability, they emphasized continued efforts for a two-state solution. Additionally, they discussed Lebanon's presidential election, Syria's stability, and efforts to restore stability in Sudan, Libya, Yemen, and Somalia. Ceasefire. Gaza's civil defense has reported dozens of strikes since the ceasefire announcement. Palestinian media declared 28 casualties in scattered attacks, highlighting ongoing assaults on civilians despite the truce. The situation underscores rising concerns about Israel's adherence to the ceasefire and the humanitarian impact on Gaza's population. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has claimed Hamas reneged on parts of the ceasefire agreement, delaying Israeli government approval. Netanyahu accused Hamas of seeking last-minute concessions and said Israel would only proceed once mediators confirm that Hamas accepts all terms. The Israeli government was set to greenlight the truce today, following a devastating 15-month conflict that has caused tens of thousands of casualties, widespread destruction, and a humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Hamas has refuted Benjamin Netanyahu's claims that it backtracked on the Gaza ceasefire agreement. That comes as Hamas affirms its commitment to the deal brokered by mediators. Egypt, Qatar and the United States announced the truce agreement, including a detainee exchange and sustainable calm, aiming for a permanent ceasefire. The Israeli government was set to approve a Gaza ceasefire agreement today following the 15-month war. However, the cabinet meeting was postponed until the Israeli negotiation team returns. That comes as Israeli airstrikes continued overnight, resulting in numerous Palestinian casualties and highlighting ongoing violence despite the proposed truce. US President Joe Biden has announced that Israel and Hamas reached a ceasefire and the detainee swap agreement. Biden added that the agreement aims to end the fighting in Gaza and increase humanitarian aid to Palestinian civilians. Biden stated that the first phase of the ceasefire will last 6 weeks, followed by a permanent end to the war. The deal achieved after 15 months of conflict will also bring humanitarian assistance to Gaza.
I believe in the idea for which this nation stands. Nation where
A European Union monitoring delegation is set to arrive in Cairo early next week to facilitate the implementation of the Gaza ceasefire agreement. The delegation is expected to focus on establishing a mechanism for reopening the Palestinian side of the Rafah crossing, which is a critical step in easing movement and supporting the truce. Egypt's Foreign Minister Badr Abdel Ati has discussed the developments in Gaza with the UK Foreign Secretary David Lammy. Lammy praised Egypt's key role in brokering the detainee exchange and ceasefire agreement. Badr Abdel Ati highlighted Egypt's efforts alongside Qatar and the United States and stressed the need for broad humanitarian aid, hospital rehabilitation, and the return of displaced residents. Abdel Ati reaffirmed Egypt's commitment to the agreement's implementation in full coordination with Qatar and the United States. The Lebanese President Joseph Aoun has welcomed the Gaza ceasefire agreement, expressing hope that it would end Gaza's tragic situation. In a post on X, Aoun stressed the need to closely monitor Israel's adherence, citing its history of evading commitments and disregarding international resolutions. Kuwait has welcomed the Gaza ceasefire, emphasizing its importance in achieving a lasting truce and ending ongoing aggression against Palestinians. The Kuwaiti Foreign Ministry commended international efforts, particularly by Egypt, Qatar and the United States, to facilitate the agreement. Kuwait expressed hope that the ceasefire would ease Palestinian suffering and ensure uninterrupted humanitarian aid. The country's foreign ministry also reaffirmed its steadfast support for a Palestinian state with East Jerusalem as its capital, based on pre-June 1967 borders. King Abdullah II of Jordan has welcomed the Gaza ceasefire announcement. He also urged the international community to intensify efforts to address the humanitarian crisis caused by the conflict. In a post on X, King Abdullah II praised Egypt, Qatar and the United States for their roles and expressed the importance of sustaining the ceasefire. He reaffirmed Jordan's support for Palestinians, ongoing aid and commitment to achieving peace in the region.
The destructive war on Gaza and the escalations in the West Bank.
And now we go across to the newsroom where Selma is waiting for us. Selma.
Thank you, Mark. And for further analysis on the current situation in Gaza after the ceasefire agreement, we're joined from Cairo by Al-Ahram Managing Editor Mohammed Azzuddin. Mr. Mohammed, thank you so much for joining us on Qnews. And first off, just hours after the ceasefire agreement was reached, the Israeli bombardments have started, resulting in 8 massacres so far, including the targeting of hospitals. And from here, I would like to ask you, how do you view the ceasefire agreement in Gaza?
I think that the continuation of the aggressions and bombardment in Gaza areas is the last breath of the far extremist wing before reaching taken the executing or enforcing the agreement in the 19th of January. And I think it are a desperate attempt to impose a new reality or a bid to fail the agreement sponsored by Egypt, Qatar, and the United States of America. Therefore, such attempts, firstly, express the internal reality in Israel and the desire of Benjamin Netanyahu and the far right wing in assaulting the Palestinians. And in the meantime, they consider it is the last press for stubborn before reaching the truth to take into effect on next Sunday. Also, there is a great international concern, and the EU monitoring delegations have already arrived in Cairo to control the Palestinian side of Rafah crossing. That Egypt already provided 75% of the humanitarian aid in the Gaza Strip and exerted and through the past 15 months, enduring efforts by starting, in fact, on humanitarian caravan to be delivered in Gaza upon the executing the first phase of the ceasefire agreement. And I consider the ceasefire agreement is a great diplomatic triumph from Egypt and Qatar, and expresses the U.S. desire to get rid of the headache of Gaza, particularly upon the arrival of the new U.S. administration. What has been declared as, along with the Egyptian stance, that
So, sir, sorry for interrupting you here, but I would like to shed light on an important issue. So, Israel has delayed a cabinet vote on the Gaza ceasefire deal, blaming Hamas for violating parts of the agreement, while Hamas said it's fully committed to the agreement. What are Netanyahu's strategic objectives behind this delay?
Two ministers are in the hidden the matter, and it's a tip through launching lies. But in reality, Hamas is already committed to what has been declared, sponsored by Egypt, Qatar, and America. Therefore, these attempts are desperate from the Israeli cabinet to minimize the commitment in a way or another, and to prove the continuation of the fierce attack and killing the people in the Gaza Strip. And I think there is some sort of a conflict inside Israel between the desire of the moderate parties of Israel and between the far extreme wing that wishes to continue the war and the bloodshed and to be as much as possible on the top of the authority. This matter is indicate from the Israeli side is just a desperate attempt to fail the beginning of enforcing the abiding agreement sponsored by Egypt, Qatar, and USA.
So, sir, speaking of the far-right government and its impact on the ceasefire agreement, how do you see the divisions within the Israeli government regarding the ceasefire?
I evaluated the division through a desire of put an end to the matter, whether from the far wing part that helps to annex extra territories in the Gaza Strip, and between the moderate part that thinks that the Israeli state, along with its economy, are deteriorating, Also, there is a desire from the families of the detainees in the Gaza Strip that they are organizing demonstrations on a weekly basis before the extreme administration that wish to continue the wars and more annexation of the Palestinian territories. It is an old habit within the Israeli cabinet successively that on top of which the most extremist one, the last one, even the division that took place in the Israeli cabinet.
So
They wish also to.
Sorry, sir, for interrupting you here, but I would like to ask you about the statements made by the Israeli Finance Minister Smotrich, who set conditions to stay in the government, including the commitment to resume the fighting if Hamas was not overthrown within 42 days. Do you think he will really resign from the government over this agreement?
I don't think that his opinion has no effect, and they will provide his resignation to within the upcoming 48 hours, along with the enforcing of the agreement. Netanyahu will keep him to use his services in extremist ideas. But this phase of the phase of a ceasefire and to start the first phase, this division is expected between whether from the far-wing right and the support in the Israeli cabinet. It won't have much of effect, but there is a must of diplomatic and world monitoring to impose Israel to execute the agreement of 3 phases, not only upon the first phase by releasing the prisoners even they were detained in the previous. This is a political maneuver, and I think would come up to a failure. And the Israeli internal affairs will be divided, and the 2 extremist parties will hand their resignation to within the upcoming 48 hours.
Lastly, sir, do you think there will come a day where Israel will honor the ceasefire agreement without any violations?
I think that we will see some violations of the agreement, but the general outlet being signed and agreed upon, and I do not think for Netanyahu or for the extremist parties in the Israeli cabinet to escape from this agreement, particularly with the change of the new US administration, that they wish to close such a file and to pay concern of other world files, whether they are related to Russia or to annexing new territories, or it is related to the gains and to have a remedy for what happened inside America. I think it is a political maneuver, and ultimately there will be a commitment, but some violations would take place, and as it used to be by Israel when failed at the first ceasefire sponsored by the Egyptian party.
That was Al Ahram Managing Editor Mohammed Azzeddin. Thank you so much for joining us here on Qnews and for all the information you provided us with. And now we're going to move back to Mark in the studio.
Thank you, Selma. Thank you indeed for that. Now, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation has welcomed the Gaza ceasefire agreement. Secretary General Hussein Brahim Taha expressed hope for a lasting halt to Israeli aggression, the return of displaced residents, and unimpeded humanitarian aid across Gaza. He urged the international community to enforce UN resolutions and the Israeli occupation and secure Palestinians' legitimate rights, including establishing an independent state within 1967 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital. Meanwhile, Russia has expressed optimism that the Gaza ceasefire could pave the way for resolving the Palestinian issue. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova stated that Moscow hopes the agreement will create conditions for a comprehensive political statement based on recognized international laws. She added that the deal should stabilize Gaza, enable displaced people to return, and initiate the reconstruction of the war-torn region. The Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov has welcomed any settlement that achieves a ceasefire in Gaza, alleviates human suffering, and enhances Israeli security. Peskov emphasized that Russia did not participate in the negotiations between Hamas and Israel, but remains attentive even to the process's outcome. He reiterated Moscow's support for efforts to stabilize the region. The Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has welcomed the Gaza ceasefire agreement, urging all parties to release hostages and end violence and humanitarian suffering. In a post on X, Trudeau emphasized the hope for a two-state solution, which would enable everyone to live securely within internationally recognized borders in peace and dignity. Trudeau also thanked Egypt, Qatar and the United States for their efforts in mediating the truce.
Israelis and Palestinians living side by side in safety, security and dignity.
The German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock has expressed deep emotion over the Gaza ceasefire and detainee agreement, describing it as a significant step after 15 months of effort. Baerbock emphasized the urgency of releasing detainees and delivering humanitarian aid to Gaza, while noting Europe's readiness to assist. The political groundwork, she added, was developed in collaboration with Gulf partners.
Serious crimes during the civil war must remain.
The French President Emmanuel Macron has emphasized the need to respect the Gaza ceasefire and called for a political solution. In a post on X, Macron expressed relief for Gaza's population after 15 months of suffering and expressed hope for detainees and their families. Macron called for the release of all detainees and emphasized the need to protect Gaza's residents, while also advocating for a political resolution to the crisis. Now to Lebanon, where Lebanese President Joseph Aoun has welcomed the recent agreement aimed at ending the tragic situation in Gaza, acknowledging the extensive international efforts that led to its conclusion. President Aoun stressed the need for Israel's commitment to the agreement, calling for continued oversight by sponsor nations and the UN. He warned against Israel's evasion of obligations, citing violations in southern Lebanon, and Aoun reaffirmed Palestine's right to a sovereign state and hoped the agreement would enable their return. He also called for the urgent reconstruction of Gaza. Qatar's ambassador to Lebanon, Sheikh Saud bin Abdulrahman Al Thani, handed Lebanese President Joseph Aoun a written message from Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, the Emir of Qatar. The message extended an official invitation for Aoun to visit Doha, where discussions will include issues of common interest and means to boost and strengthen ties between the two countries in all fields. The Spanish Foreign Minister, José Manuel Álvarez, has reaffirmed Spain's continued support for Lebanon, emphasizing the country's crucial role in maintaining peace and stability in the region. After meeting with President Aoun, Álvarez expressed hopes for a permanent ceasefire between Hezbollah and Israel and stressed the need for Lebanese troops south of the Litani River. He praised Lebanon's political progress and Spain's readiness to support the country, including a €10 million aid package. Spanish troops are the largest contingent in UNIFIL. A delegation from the Founding Committee for Beirut Port Explosion Victims has presented documents implicating individuals not yet summoned in the ongoing investigation. Hotait condemned Judge Tariq Bitar's return to duty, accusing him of bypassing legal procedures and ignoring lawsuits, including a claim of the usurpation of power by former public prosecutor Gaza Awedat. And that's almost all we have time for now, but here's a recap of the main headlines. Egypt and the UAE presidents discuss regional security, the Gaza ceasefire, and stability across several nations. Israeli airstrikes on northern Gaza persist despite ceasefire, causing casualties and humanitarian concerns. And the US President Joseph Biden announces details on the ceasefire agreements between Israel and Hamas. And that's all we have time for this hour in our news bulletin. But don't forget to follow Q News on YouTube, X, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok at QNewsEGY. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more updates here on Q News.